So I want to cover my medieval toy soldier collection, and this is my collection here. It took me a few years to amass this, really, and I intend selling it on eBay shortly because the years of austerity have finally taken their toll on me. But I just want to talk about the knights in this collection. We've got mounted knights and foot soldiers, men at arms. So I want to start here with this group here. These soldiers here were made by a company called Britain's Herald. They were made in the 1960s, and they're fine soldiers. When we were little children, my parents bought some of these for, not these actual ones, but bought similar ones for Christmas. And there's we see a medieval foot soldier with a longbow. Pretty generic. I would say he's dressed in the garb of the 1200s, the Robin Hood period, early 1200s onwards, but really contemporary with any medieval period, the 1200s, the 1300s, even the 1400s. You could use him in those wargaming in those armies, even in the Wars of the Roses. And I have a thing for archers. I love archers. They're just the pose, the dynamic pose they have. We are. Most archers were armed with swords, because once they'd unleashed a volley of arrows and the enemy closed with them, they would be forced to defend themselves at close combat, close quarters. So these are Britain's Herald knights from the 1960s. All in good condition. All these knights are in good condition. There, the base of that should say "Made in England." Sorry, "Made in Hong Kong." In the 1960s, it was all in Hong Kong. Made in Hong Kong for Britain's Limited. And then we also have some knights on horseback from that period. Here's one of them. There's a interesting heraldic device on his shield, the red rose. And often these knights, were used for wargaming the Wars of the Roses. The battles, between the great magnates of the realm during the Wars of the Roses, which lasted from 1455 to 1485. And between the houses of York and Lancaster, and the Wars of the Roses. And at the battlefield of Bosworth, there was the battlefield of Bosworth, there was a famous diorama, and a lot of these figures, and also the figures from the War of the Roses range that Britain made, called the Swappet Knights, which are very expensive and which I don't actually have here. I don't have any of those. I think I've got one archer, but they're very expensive, and they were refurbished, remodeled, and used in that diorama. Hundreds of them, to reproduce the Battle of Bosworth, and in particular this knight. I remember as a lad being at the Bosworth Battlefield Centre, and they'd taken this figure off this horse. He was lying in a hayrick on that diorama, dead. He was representing the Duke of Norfolk, which I think was John Howard, who commanded the van of Richard III's army, and was in command of the men at arms, and Richard sent down the hill to engage the Earl of Oxford's infantry, and he was killed in the fighting. and he was sort of like lying dismounted, lying on the battlefield. They use this actual figure, if I'm not mistaken, with his visor up like that, lying there. They used him for the Duke of Norfolk. And then these, in the 1970s, 1971 to be exact, there we are, made in England, Britain's detail. They produced some knights, rigid plastic knights painted, and that crown, you see that crown, just from the crown up like that, was taken off and put on a mounted knight, from what I understand, and Richard III used to model Richard III, from what I understand. And this gentleman, for instance, is a knight. I love the detail of these knights. He's got a heraldic crest on his head. That's a yellow boar. Now, the boar was a very popular emblem or insignia in the Wars of the Roses, or in the medieval period, really. This type of crest would be from the 1300s. But the badge of the Earl of Oxford, who led Henry VII's infantry at, or the Earl of Richmond as he was known there, the Earl of Richmond's van at Bosworth, the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, his badge, the Earl of Oxford's badge, was a blue boar, whereas the white boar was the badge of Richard, King Richard III. But there we are, now he's wielding a battle axe with a cloak and a heraldic crest. And just going back to these from the 60s, some of these men-at-arms here, they've got like maced club, spiked mace clubs, and he's in plate armour. This plate armour really came into prominence in the 1400s, although his helmet looks similar to those of the 1300s, but they've got the heraldic devices are still on there. Shields. There's a men-at-arms there. There, again, there's the red rose, often used by the House of Lancaster. And so we have some of these knights. Here's a jolly fellow with his visor up, again in plate armour, excellent detail. Superb. We have some other men there. So yeah, that's the 1960s, the Herald, Britain's Herald range. Then we have these knights here, and they're wearing, that's a classical sallet helmet. They were made by German armourers and Italian armourers in the 1400s. Very popular in the Wars of the Roses. He's a typical knight. Lovely detail again. Full plate armour. Now, armour was very expensive, so if you could get armour, was used sometimes for hundreds of years. If you got your great granddad's helmet and you were, you would use it if you weren't of the nobility, because the nobility would be able to afford the latest armour. But if you didn't have that, you'd make do with what you had. There's an archer, look at that. Excellent poise. There's his sword, you see. Interesting pattern of his armour. A lot of them wore leather armour with chainmail and padding underneath the leather, padded wool or cotton. Mind you, cotton would be quite expensive, but so probably woolen. And here's a chap. He's got a helmet that's similar to the period of the late 1200s, early 1300s, the time of Robert Bruce. I also see that they've painted him in the classic Crusader symbology. There's his shield on his back. I think the star, I don't know whether it represents anything there, but yeah, it's a good knight there. And a man wielding a mace, spiked ball. Excellent plate armour with a crested helmet. And here's a knight with the again from the late 1200s. There's a 1200s, 1300s helmet. Now, in the 1990s, someone got the rights to reproduce these figures, and there's one. But the painting was much more. It was called Britain Super Detail, and these were from the 1990s, and the painting was just spruced up a bit more colourful. The same figures. They're not as collectible as the 1970s ones. We've got some knights here, you see, from the 70s, and a lovely pose there. Yeah, so that's Britain's. Now, back to these knights. These were like, now, these longbows were very popular during the 100 Years' War. You see the English knights there. Their archers won the battles for them at Crécy and Poitiers. And then a bit later under Henry V, you know, the famous Battle of Agincourt. But here we have some French Revel, a company called Revel produced these 1/35 scale knights. That was 1 inch, 1 real inch would be equal to 35 real inches equal an inch. That's what that means, 1/35 scale. There's a French knight. I started painting them, and they're slightly smaller than the other knights, but they're still compatible. From the 100 Years' War period, there's a mounted knight. From the 100 Years' War period. And the 100 Years' War, from what I understand, it raged from the 1320s to the 1450s in France. And it was fought between the English and the French. The English were French. The Plantagenets, they were descended from the French. They had many domains in France. For instance, Aquitaine, Anjou, you know, all of these provinces have been won from the French. Ultimately, Henry V conquered the French, and he was the King of France. His son, King Henry VI, was married to Catherine de Valois, of the House of Valois, and they became the French heirs. The English kings claimed the French crown. But by the time of the Wars of the Roses in 1452, 1455, we're only left with Calais. The enclave of the port of Calais was English. That was all that was left, and that gave impetus to the Duke of York to claim the throne, from claiming that the House of Lancaster had lost the domains to France and were incompetent, because Henry VI was more of a saint than a warrior. And these are the grievances, you know, the Duke of York had been regent, and he was now asserting a claim in his own right. In 1455, open war broke out between the houses of Lancaster and York. So it's exciting, and these knights can be used in to depict that struggle. And then here we have airfix. You know, in the 1970s we have 1/32 scale airfix knight. That's 32 real inches, now equal an inch. They're slightly bigger than the French knights, although you wouldn't think it. I mean, you see, it depends on the manufacturer. Some are more compatible than others, but if you compare these knights, for instance, these small French knights with these big, bulky, chunky Britons, these gold, it looks like Teutonic knights range. If you compare them with them, I mean, they dwarf them. These gold knights dwarf them. But these are like a one-off anomaly. And these were made in the 1990s as well, but they're like huge. They're chunky, big knights. Huge shields, and they're shiny shields, and they're also going to be going on eBay. There, and I've got some gold knights there, mounted knights. There, 3 of them. And we've also got these, were also made in the 1990s, these, what I call the Neo Swappets. So like the old Swappets were very expensive, these weren't so expensive. These are quite rare now. You can't really get them anymore, they don't make them. I don't think they're made in large numbers, like mass produced as the detail. But their heads and the weapons and the arms move, and they're really quite attractive. They can augment their waist move. They can augment any, like, Medieval Army. There we are. There's 15, I've got 15 foot soldiers there, like that. There's a fellow, isn't he? Sir Henry. And then we've got quite a few of those, once again, classic profiles of armour. The sallet helmet with the slit visor. These horses' heads move. He's got a sword there, two-handed sword. Lovely armour for the horse, flanged armour. And I've got a few of them. Yeah. There's a warhammer. Chap with a warhammer. Sallet helmet, which was popular during the Wars of the Roses. The German and the Italian manufacturers manufactured armour during the medieval period, the late medieval period. They were excellent, and they created the sallet helmet, which was extremely popular in the English armies, the medieval armies. Going back to this fellow here, there's a typical sallet armour helmet, and they made some lovely knights, did Britons. Look at that. I mean, look at the action in that, thrusting with the sword. Some archers there. Love archers. Speaking of archers, these airfix archers, we've got 10 of them like that. The detail is fascinating. Now, at the Battle of Towton in 1461, Edward IV of the House of York, that battle sealed and secured his claim to the throne, firmly entrenched him as a King of England. The Yorkist archers were numbering in their thousands. You'd have whole blocks of 2,000 archers at a time. Sometimes more archers would be deployed on medieval battlefields than there were men at arms. But in a snowstorm that was flying, in a blizzard, it was flying in the face of the Lancastrians They were advancing into the face of the blizzard. The Yorkists fired their arrows and the wind sent them flying forward, right into the Lancastrians. It decimated the Lancastrians. There was over 28,000 casualties, some believe, in the Battle of Towton. They've even found the bodies, you know, like there have been mass graves. And it was the bloodiest battle fought on English soil, the Battle of Towton. But the English archers were devastating. And look at that, lovely. And I could command, if you say right now, if these were real men and you were in Warwick Castle, I could command at least 30. I've got 30 archers here on this table that I could deploy against you, firing volleys of arrows at you. And that's devastating to anyone on the walls or inside the walls. They could fire over the walls. It's like the medieval artillery, light artillery. And then so we've got like some Britain's detailed mounted knights over there. We've got guys jousting, fluted armour, black armour. And then here we've got the enemy. We've got Saracens and Turks. Well, these would be, I would say, the closest Seljuk Turks. There they are, look at those guys. The armour is look at that, beautiful. There we are. Some Turks. The old crescent. And this guy, he actually looks like Saladin himself. Right there, with the scimitar. There we are. Saladin, and then Salahuddin, or however it's pronounced. There we are. Some Seljuk Turk. I think he was a Saracen. So there we have some of them. Then we got this guy. He reminds me of some like wandering Arab. Reminds me of the guy on Raiders of the Lost Ark. One shot will dispatch him, but he's in good condition. He's a Timpo. I think he came with the Arab, you know, with the Foreign Legion guys, but he would fit any Arab army. And talking about Timpo, we've got these from these were sold in. You get groups of 5 knights in a paper bag really, with sweets in. And sometimes you got Western people as well and other soldiers, but there we've got some of them knights. They were pretty cheap at the time though, but still you can't get them now. Not unattractive. They'll help fill out any armies, medieval armies. Then we have Timpo Crusaders there, and knights at the back. There's a White Rose Knight, favourite decal. Got another guy there with a mace. These are Timpo Crusaders in various poses, in various colours. A couple of mounted guys with a shield. There, Timpo Knights. And then we've got these William Britons. These are the latest. They they're metal, and he's in the colours of you can get them in various colours, but he's in the colours of Sir Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, who at first supported Edward IV, his cousin, but then at the Battle of Barnet in 1471, Neville himself fell. He was a turncoat. He was a very powerful magnate, and he sided with the Lancastrians. He fell out with Edward over Edward's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville, and he swapped sides again, tried to put Henry VI back on the throne, and the bid failed. Eventually, at the Battle of Tewkesbury, I think it was 1472. Again, the Yorkist victory was secured. But this is my collection, and I don't really know how I'm going to market this. If you have any ideas, let me know what they're worth. I don't really know how much it's worth. Here's back to these guys. He's wielding a bastard sword. Can you see the serrations there? It's a two-handed sword. I'll get one that's where the serrations more prominent. He has a bastard sword. He's wielding that. And another guy throwing boulders down off the castle from siege. The detail is incredible. These are airfix again. Airfix. These are rare. All of these knights are rare. There's a black knight. I love the black knights, very smart. Black knight on a horse, jousting. But yeah. And then we've got some Moors over here, or Saracens, that someone has professionally sort of painted for use in war games. Like that. Lovely. Those are the Saracen warriors, 1/32 scale, and here they are. I wouldn't like to meet that bunch on a dark night, but there's an archer again with a composite bow, famous Scythian composite bow. He's firing, and they're excellent horse archers. They would charge up to your wheel around, fire, and then off they'd go. And then they're devastating. There's not much you can do against guys like that unless you've got heavy cover, light cavalry that can chase them and hound them off the field. But they are light cavalry again. They will themselves be susceptible to the archery of the Saracens. So that's where we are. I just thought I'd do this video. That's my medieval army. I don't know how much it's worth. I know I can't take it with me when I go, and I know I'm going to leave it all behind. So rather convert this into cash and use it for more worthwhile causes than storing up treasure here below. But here we go. That's how it goes. I'm going to probably put them into lots. That would probably form a lot there, and then another lot there, a lot there. There we have a lot. Another lot there, you see. Another lot. Another lot. But yeah, that's my medieval knights collection. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Have a lovely evening. Bye bye.